Good morning. It's great to be with you this morning. I'm really glad that you're here and that we're able to gather in this place and talk about the Word of God. I'm grateful for the country that still allows that and that you take advantage of it. And that we call this the time to worship and be a part of the church, the body of believers. We're going to continue in the series, Matters of the Heart, as you see on the screen. And so far in this series, we've covered hurts and why hurts matter and the choices we make when we're hurting, right? So often we make choices while we're going through times of pain that have undesirable outcomes. And so what we do in our pain really makes a difference in the future, doesn't it? So we talked about hurts, we've talked about choices, and today we're going to talk about hope and the reason we need hope. We live in a world that is hope deficient, don't we? It seems like we live in a world that could really use a major dose of hope. We live in a time where people tend to be lacking the vision that life is better, and it's not all about the pain you're in the moment, but there's another season coming, and God is in the pain of the moment and in the season to come, and that gives us hope, right? A lot of you know a bit of my story. It's not surprising to those that have heard it that my dad and I, when I was growing up, didn't have a good relationship. My dad was an alcoholic, and in my hatred of him, I developed my own addiction issues from a relatively young age and started self-medicating in 8th grade, and that continued on until the middle of my senior year. There was always a refrigerator filled with alcohol in our basement, and so it was easy for that to go unnoticed, and Mom and Dad would go to bed early because Dad would get up at 5 a.m. and go to the mold where he worked. And so I would, what started young, continued on, and it was because I allowed hate to become deep-seated in my life. And I'll tell you this, hate, like anything else that is not great for your life, will keep you longer than you want to stay, and it'll cost you more than you want to pay. And the outcome of hate is never beautiful. If you hate yourself, if you hate other people, hate is not a beautiful thing for your life. So I traded hope that I wanted to have for hate that I did have. It was 6th grade the first time I drove my father home from the American Legion, which was somewhere between 5.5 to 7 miles from the farm we lived on, because he was so inebriated I had to help him in the truck. I hated him. There were times I would lay awake and think if I could drop a tree on him and nobody would know and it would look like an accident because we heated our entire house with firewood. I hated him, right? But something happened. Something happened. I was 19. My birthday was late. I have an October birthday, so I started school later, and I liked 5th grade so much I stayed an extra year. It was the middle of my senior year. If they would not have allowed me to graduate, I would have been 20 going in. I think it was an endurance test. They said, graduate the kid. He's not going to quit. Middle of my senior year, it was January. My life was out of control. My sister, who has been in and out of rehab, became a constant supplier for me of marijuana and other things, and I was spiraling in self-hatred and addiction of a lot of things, and I was filled with anger. There wasn't anybody in my life that I don't think I hated at the time. I hated God. Anybody ever been there? Where you held God responsible for all the circumstances of your life? Because it starts with things like this. The dialogue in your mind, or the monologue with which you speak at God, sounds like this. If you loved me, right? If you're real, if you're all-powerful, if you're God, then why this X, Y, Z, right? I don't tell you this stuff because I want your pity. I tell you this because I now walk in freedom. I tell you this because I'm on the other side of it. I harbor no hurt in my heart anymore for my dad, or anger at my dad, or hatred toward my dad. Because, see, something happened in January of 1990. It was the 16th day. It's a more important day to me than my actual date of my birth. It was the day that everything changed. You know, when you get to the end of yourself, you're at the beginning of something profitable. God says, Jesus said, his strength is perfect when your strength is gone. There was a trade that was about to be made in my life, and it would orient all the rest of my days until the very moment in which I'm standing here. And the trade was from hate to hope. Because Jesus did something in me. I got on my knees, and after having talked to my brother who was going to school in Nyack, New York, my brother got his life together way earlier than I did. And he was always kind of just a good kid, good guy, good student. I'm the youngest of 5. He's the 4th of 5. He's 19 months older than me. And I called him and I said, I need what you have. And he said, you need Jesus, and you know that's what you need. And I described all the things that were out of control. And that day, I prayed on my knees something that sounded maybe like this: God, I've made a mess of everything, and I need you to make it different now. I've messed it up as far as I can. I need you to do it in me. And I can't understand it all, and I don't know why it happened. But you know, the Bible, in the New Testament, there's a lot of places where it uses the word suddenly or in an instant. I don't understand it, but it was that way for me. All the things that I had been masking with and medicating with no longer were appealing to me. No longer did I have a desire for alcohol. No longer did I have a desire for marijuana. No longer did I. It's the last day I smoked a Marlboro Light. It's the last day that I took a pill that wasn't prescribed to me. It was the last day. And it was a different day. And here's what happened. There was a trade. There was a new work in my spirit. And, you know, I was wearing a mullet at the time. Business in the front, party in the back, right? Anybody else ever wear a mullet? The Lord knows. Thank you, Gary. Thank you. I see that hand. Yeah. My dad hated the long hair, right? Because he had been in the Navy and he always wore a flat top. 2 days into this new relationship, because I no longer wanted to have all this friction, I got a flat top. And I'm wearing a flat top now. And my dad is looking at me like I'm the strangest human being he's ever witnessed, because I'm no longer filling the ashtrays up around the house. I'm no longer spewing mean words, and I'm coming home. There were periods of 4 to 5 weeks at a time. My parents would have no idea where I was. I would be sleeping on somebody's couch or wherever. My dad began to see the change, and the hatred I had turned to hurt for him. It wasn't my hurt. I hurt for him because I began to see my dad with the truth of his own pain, right? Because people operate out of the center of their pain instead of the center of their wholeness most of the time, don't they? And that's what he'd been doing. And I hurt for him. And I had this newfound hope in Jesus. And I began to pray for my dad like it mattered instead of hating my dad like it was what fueled my life. And I just want to tell you that there was a trade that I made, and this acronym became something that I did. I don't know what I use acronyms because they help me remember important things sometimes, but hope for me is holding on, praying expectantly. I believe that God could do for my dad what God had done for me. I believe that God could set him free the way he did for me. I don't know where you are with Jesus, but I just want you to know that he makes all things new. I want you to know that Jesus just isn't some religious idea, and he didn't die to be your religion. He died to be your Savior and to have a relationship with you which gives you life and leads you toward freedom, not pain. Right? That's what he did for me. And I believed he could do it for my dad. I'll finish that story real quick because I'm really good at starting these and you guys lean in and then I move on and you're like, what happened? And I don't want to return all the emails. This is what happened. I went to Mount Vernon Nazarene University. It's the only school that would take me on provisional status. And they began to love me and help shape me. That's where I met my bride. And it was the spring of my freshman year at Mount Vernon that I got a note on my door. That's when only phones were in the hallways and you still could put dimes in phones, right? Remember that? And my mom had called. It was a Sunday afternoon. And I called her back, and my mom began to tell me that Dad at church that day at the Christian Missionary Alliance Church on the Curve in Willard, Ohio, stayed until all the sanctuary had left, and he went down and prayed at an altar, and he gave his life to Jesus Christ. And I can tell you this, it was a new day for my dad. I would like to tell you that Dad never drank another beer. It wasn't instantly for him, but I can tell you I never saw him drunk again. I never saw him swerving on the road again. I'd like to tell you he never smoked another cigarette, but that's not true. But I will tell you this, God did a deep work in his life, and he was on a journey for the next 5 years until he died. He died at 60 of a cerebral hemorrhage, but it was the best 5 years of our entire relationship. Several times a week and nearly every day, my dad and I had a conversation on the phone. We talked about the Indians and Omar and Carlos, Baerga, all those things. We began to build a bridge where there had been an enormous gap, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. So, back to this. I think hope and forgiveness are the two most powerful forces in the human life. I think hope and forgiveness are the two most powerful things we can have and that we can give. And if you possess hope, it has an effect on the people around you. If you're living in despair, it has an effect on the people around you, doesn't it? It kind of leaks to those around us. So I want you to know that I think the most important thing that we can do is make wise choices when it comes to hope. I think we need to make wise choices when it comes to hope because life is too easy to deal us despair, right? We're going to continue in the story of which this series is based, found in the book of Ruth in the Old Testament, right after the book of Judges. In the beginning of the story, Ruth isn't mentioned, but Naomi and her husband, Elimelech, and their 2 sons leave Bethlehem because there's a famine, and they go down 50 miles away from where they lived, which would be an incredibly long journey in that day. And they settle for a period of time in Moab. Moab was a nation that has a unique and weird history. I won't explain it all today, but the Moabites were enemies of Israel. They were enemies of Israel for a lot of reasons, one of them being that when the Jewish people were wandering around the desert, the Moabites would not help give them provision when they sought provision. So to go to Moab was looked down on by the Jewish people by and large, and they settled there, and Naomi did what she was told to do because she would not have been asked, do you want to go? She would have been told most likely by Elimelech, this is what we're going to do. And they go and they settle in Moab for a period of time, and Elimelech dies. Her 2 boys marry girls from Moab, which would have been a real cultural issue and problem for Naomi. And it's not long into it. They're there a decade, and both the boys die. We don't know how they died, but they're dead. And now Naomi is widowed and childless. She had heard that the Lord's favor had returned to Bethlehem, and so she planned to go back. And she said to Orpah and Ruth, those are the 2 girls that her boys married, stay here with your family, worship your gods. And after some convincing, Orpah did that. What Naomi was doing was releasing them from the Levirate covenant, so it was a Jewish marriage covenant that they had created with the family, not just the boys. In counseling, when I say you marry a family, you really do. In the Jewish culture, you really did. So Orpah took the offer to break covenant and leave, and she did that and went back. But Ruth said, there's no way I'm leaving. Where you go, I'll go. Where you stay, I'll stay. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Ruth was making a trade. She was honoring a covenant and making a huge trade. We all make trades. And I would encourage you today, if you're walking around with a lot of hatred or a lot of hurt, that you should make the trade for a lot of hope, because that's what the cross offers each one of us. Ruth and Naomi start back the 50 miles, and when they get back to Bethlehem, the ladies of Bethlehem are going, "Is that Naomi?" And when they brought it to her attention, asking, are you Naomi? Because she'd been gone a while, she said, "Don't call me Naomi anymore." The word Naomi, the name Naomi, meant beautiful or pleasant, lovely or pleasant. She said, "Call me Mara," which means bitter. I left full in the Lord. She's blaming God this whole time, and God has brought me back empty. Chapter 2, when I said choices matter, Ruth and Naomi are both widowed, and they both have unpleasant circumstances facing them, but Ruth chose to go and do what was made provision for by the law and follow the harvesters because they're in poverty. They have no one to provide for them. And she begins to follow the harvesters and glean, pick up, stalk by stalk, what was left behind them to feed her and Ruth, or her and Naomi. Turns out she was in the field of Boaz, and Boaz was a relative, a cousin to Elimelech, who was her dead father-in-law. Try to stay with me. I know it's a lot of pieces. And Boaz is showing favor to Ruth that he did not need to show her above and beyond allowing her just to pick up grain in his field. And she said, "Why are you being so kind?" And he said, "Because word about you has spread. Your kindness to Naomi, everybody knows about it. And you came here. May the Lord bless you for your kindness and repay your kindness, under whose wings you have come to find refuge." He's saying, may Yahweh provide for you and repay your kindness, and it's under Yahweh's wings that your provision will come. It's what you seek. The word for wings there is kanap. We're going to learn of it in our story. It's the same word as garment. We'll catch up to it in just a minute. If I'm boring you, thanks for looking interested. So we break into chapter 3. Naomi and Ruth are still widowed. Naomi and Ruth are still in poverty. There's nobody to provide for them. In a customary way for a Jewish family, in chapter 3, hope matters. One day, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not try to find a home for you where you will be well provided for? Is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you have been, a kinsman of ours? Tonight he'll be winnowing barley on the threshing floor." She's saying, I feel bad. You left everything that you could have stayed back for to come here, and we have nothing. I need to help you find a husband. So Naomi is turning into a yenta. In the Jewish culture, that means matchmaker, right? Have you seen Fiddler on the Roof? Matchmaker, matchmaker, make me a match. Find me a find. Anyway, I'll stop because you're going to cry. There's a reason we have great musicians and I'm not it. Naomi's trying to set this up, and she's saying, isn't Boaz? Boaz is one of our relatives, and he's a kinsman, and that really matters because according to the law, a kinsman has the opportunity to redeem or provide for those that he's related to. So there were some primary things that the kinsmen did. One would be if land were sold, they could redeem the land that had been sold and bring it back into the family. They could buy a relative who had been sold into slavery or even sold themselves into slavery out of poverty and redeem them back, right? Those were some of the responsibilities. A kinsman had each other's back. That's kind of the way it worked. Isn't he a kinsman of ours? Because he was a relative of her deceased father-in-law. You know, he's not only a relative, this is what he's going to be doing tonight. I'm not sure how Naomi knew, but maybe she assumed because that's what people did in that time after the harvest. But you would think because Boaz was pretty wealthy, he probably would have had somebody do his threshing and winnowing. But what threshing and winnowing means is they would find a flat place, or they would hewn out a flat place on the mountain, and they would put rocks around it, and the earth would be hard, and the place would be prepared, and they would have an ox with a flat sled, weighted. They would spread their barley and their wheat all over the place, and they would have a circle of rocks so that the grain would stay within this primary area, and the ox would tread across, breaking the kernels free from the surrounding chaff. And then the ox would be taken aside, and they would take a pitchfork, a 3-pronged pitchfork like you see, right? You've seen those. And they would throw it up in the air, and the wind would blow the chaff away, but the grain that's heavier would fall in place. So that's what he's going to be doing tonight. Super exciting, sounds like fun. Don't know how Ruth could not be excited about that. And then, this is really what's crazy. This is really what's crazy to me. Before I go on, I want to say this. To live above your circumstances, choose hope over despair. Naomi had only lived in despair, and now she has a glimmer of hope that there's a way for things to be different, right? She's choosing hope. And you know what? Hope alone isn't enough. It has to pair with the actions of our life, right? We can just hope things change, and things may never change. You have to pair your activity of life with the hope that you have, right? That's what they're doing. They're about to formulate a plan. Verse 3, guys, I don't suggest you try this when you're making suggestions to your wife. It's awful. Wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes. Give it a shot, gentlemen. Try that with your wife. Hey, wash and perfume yourself and change your clothes. I mean, this sounds awful. You'd never get away with this. Wash and perfume yourself and put on your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you're there until he's finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he's lying, then go and uncover his feet and lie down. Super creepy. I'll tell you about it in a minute. He'll tell you what to do. Okay, so isn't Boaz our kinsman? I've got a plan. He's going to be threshing out his barley and his wheat. This is what you ought to do. For the love of all things, clean up. Right? Do you guys just read? I mean, please don't read the Bible like this. Is not Boaz with whose servant girls you have been a kinsman of ours? Tonight he'll be winnowing wheat and barley. Wash and perfume yourself. I mean, do you see the emotion in this? There's a plan. They're formulating a plan. They've got a reason. Wash and perfume yourself. Get cleaned up. Put on your best clothes. Go up there and be super sneaky ninja style, right? So I don't know what she's wearing. Probably dark clothes, camouflage, whatever, but smell good about it. But don't let him know you're around. And when he's done eating and drinking, note the place that he lies down. Pay attention. Pay attention. I'll do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. Wouldn't it be great? How many of us have teenagers? Don't you wish that Ruth's response would be teenager response? I'll do whatever you say. Good. Thank you. May the Lord bless and keep you. Anyway, I'll do whatever you say. She told her mother-in-law, verse 7, when Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile. They would do that to make sure that the grain wasn't stolen overnight. They would guard their commodity. So he's doing what many people who had fields are doing at that time in that season of the harvest. Ruth approached quietly. That's a key. Good thing she didn't stumble into it. Ruth approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. In the middle of the night, something startled the man. Wonder what it was. And he turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet. So she does what was told to her to do. She goes and uncovers his feet and lays probably placing the small of her back against his feet, depending on how he sleeps. If he's a belly sleeper, I don't know how it went down. But she's doing what Naomi told her to do, and it's customary. It's customary in the Jewish culture. This was a customary activity that she is doing for a reason. You know, it's really necessary to get to know a culture before you try to really change a culture, isn't it? You have to get to know a culture. When we go to Guatemala, how many of you were here for the auction this weekend? A lot of you? Wasn't that a great time? Thanks for your support. I heard that it was around $7,000 that were raised for this student trip to go. So for those of you that donated things to be auctioned or came and supported it, thank you very much. Jars of jelly were selling for $100. That's some delicious jelly. When we go to Guatemala, one of the things that's really hard for me is, you know, in our culture, women and children first. In their culture, men first. So when there's a line to eat or people are going to be served, they serve the men first. That is so uncomfortable for me. It is completely opposite of what I've been raised and how I respond and how I've raised our kids, right? So it's men first, ladies second, kids last. If there's anything less, the kids get to eat. Well, that's not how we operate, is it? But every time that early on I would protest, now we've built a relationship that we're beginning to have conversations with the Kokole, which is the town council of men, about why we need to honor our wives and why we need to honor women and all those things. But it's taken, 8 trips. She's doing what's customary. It's so easy to judge people when we don't understand their culture. It's so easy to make false assumptions when we don't understand their culture. And that's what would be easy to do here. We could think that Ruth is just being weird, but she's doing what's culturally right. So she lying down at his feet, and something startled him in the middle of the night, verse 8. We can consent that it was Ruth. And he turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet, and he said, "Who are you? Who are you?" I want to pause there and step out of the narrative, and I just want to ask that question. When's the last time you contemplated that question? Who are you? It's incredibly clarifying. Who are you? You know, I think we live in a world that has mistaken identity for so many people, and they operate in a mistaken identity because they make a trade believing that what they accumulate identifies who they are, or their paycheck identifies who they are, or their something identifies who they are that they work for or work towards. Who are you? Melissa and I spend a lot of time raising our kids, trying to help them understand this. Determine who you're going to be. Determine who you're going to be. Allow God to shape your identity and determine who you're going to be, and the doing will come much easier in life. Because you can do nearly anything for a paycheck if it doesn't conflict with what's moral and ethical, and your person isn't pinned to your identity on a paycheck, right? I would much rather our kids settle the issue of who they're going to be than what they're going to do first. Because the being can direct the doing, but you want to have a messed up life, allow the doing to begin to direct your being. Allow the doing of your identity being wrapped up in something that's not healthy because you haven't settled the being, and then you become a train wreck. Who are you? I'm really glad that Boaz asked the question. And I know that I'm out of context. We're going to jump back into this in a minute. But I want you to know, for me, January 16th helped me have a new identity, and it was based on his love, not my mess. My identity. I love the song we were singing. I don't know the name of it, but Good, Good Father. We're the sons and the daughters of a good, good Father. Man, just let that rest on you. What's that like? Because maybe like me, you didn't have a great, great father relationship for a long time. Who are you? Anyway, back to this. I can see I'm boring you now. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm the servant, Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you're my kinsman redeemer." Remember, I said the word wing and the word garment both come from the Hebrew word kanap, which means to overshadow or spread over. It means provision. She's asking him in this culture with that question to marry her. She's asking her to do what the kinsman redeemer is allowed to do and marry her, since she was a covenant daughter to his family and she was a widow without a child. Right? Spread the corner of your garment over me. Spread the cover back over me, indicating that you'll be my provider. In so doing, he would be saying, I'll marry you. Verse 10, "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after younger men, whether rich or poor. And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I'll do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you're a woman of noble character. Although it is true," verse 12, "that I'm near of kin, there's a kinsman redeemer nearer than I." We see a whole lot about Boaz's character, don't we? I say frequently, don't allow your emotions to determine your beliefs, because in his emotional euphoria, you know why Boaz wouldn't have asked her to marry him is because there's a generation gap. He's much older than her. It would have been very frowned upon in that culture for him to approach her or to initiate such a relationship, but it would have been acceptable for her to make the initiation. So he's ecstatic that she is. I bet he'd already thought about how nice it would be to be married. We don't know why he'd remained unmarried. We don't know why there's a lot of details of the story we don't know, but the ones we do know is that his character is on display when he says, "Although it's true that I'm near of kin, there's a kinsman redeemer nearer than I. Stay here for the night. And in the morning, if he wants to redeem, good, let him redeem. But if he's not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I'll do it. If he's not, I am. Lie here until morning." So she stayed at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, "Don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." He also said, "Bring me the shawl you're wearing and hold it out." And when she did, he poured 6 measures of barley and put it on her, then went back to town. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law Naomi, asked, "How'd it go, my daughter?" How do you think Naomi asked that? How many of you think Naomi slept that night? You think she's standing over well, they didn't have coffee pots, but you think she's standing over her coffee going, "Oh, it's you. So, how was your night?" No way. "How'd it go?" Right? Super excited. "How'd it go?" It went great. She tells Naomi everything and said, "And he sent me back with this grain," right? That's a significant provision to poor people. It's Boaz's way of saying, "Hey, and give Naomi a high five for giving you the idea." Naomi leaves her with this. "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until it's settled today." He's going to make sure he gets the answer today. Don't worry. Don't become unglued. Be patient, because he's working on it. Be patient, because he's not going to rest until it's done. And this is what I just want to leave you with. There came a point where Naomi had to choose hope over hurt. There came a point where Naomi had to choose action over stagnation. There came a point where Naomi and Ruth both had to choose to move forward instead of staying stuck. And I think we are people that often represent the same kind of condition that Naomi and Ruth are found in emotionally, and we want to stay stuck, and God is calling us forward in hope, right? It's so easy to want to stay stuck and expect something else to be different and better. And God calls us forward in hope, and he calls us forward with truth. And that means we have to engage action, and that's what they did in chapter 3. If you don't remember anything else I say today, remember this. If you want to live above the circumstances, you want to live above the circumstances, if you do, choose hope. If you do, choose hope. Hold on and pray expectantly. Choose hope. Get engaged in taking the battle to your mind over despair with hope. If you want to live above your circumstances, choose hope. You want to live beneath your circumstances and be weighted down by them, choose despair. They made a trade and they began to choose hope. The imagery of the kinsman redeemer. The word in the Hebrew is goel, Goel, goel. The goel, the kinsman redeemer, the one who can provide what you can't provide for yourself, the one who can do on your behalf what you cannot do for yourself. I love the imagery because it speaks to the very truth of who Jesus is for us. He is our goel. He's the one that can do for us what we could never do for ourselves. When our sin separated us from God, Jesus, in his great love, became our kinsman redeemer. And just like Ruth had to go customarily through the culture and make the ask, Boaz was all the more ready to say, I'm all about helping. I love the image. You know, I think there's a lot of prayers in our life that go unanswered because they go unasked. I think there's a lot of help that God wants to give us that we don't receive because we don't ask. Ask and it will be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. Those are Jesus' words. The half-brother of Jesus, Joseph and Mary's son, James, in the book of James says, we have not because we ask not. Had Ruth not asked Boaz, the rest of the story would be way different, and I can't wait for the next 2 weeks to wrap this up. I hope you'll come back. I hope you'll invite a friend. Include your friends. But maybe the big question right now is, what trades have you made? Maybe the big question right now are, what trades do you need to make? Maybe we should just jump, Eric, to the 3 questions at the end for the day, and it's really this. Do you know anyone who needs hope in their life? How many of you know somebody that needs hope in their life? Right? Yeah, me too. Maybe you need to just pause on this question. Have you experienced the freedom that comes from choosing hope over despair? You know, I wish it was a once and done choice. I wish I only had to choose it once. See, like every relationship, it starts with an initial decision, but it is affirmed by ongoing choices that I make, right? It would be like renewing our marriage vows. Melissa and I didn't just get married and everything's perfect. We're constantly renewing those vows with each other, right? We don't speak them out, but we speak them. We have communication about them intentionally, don't we? To keep our marriage moving forward so it doesn't stagnate. Maybe you have at some point chose hope over despair, but maybe you need to choose it again. I've been there dozens and dozens of times. Maybe that's where you're at today. Maybe that's where your marriage is at today. Are there areas in your own life where you need to make that choice now? How's it going with you? How's it going with your hope? Is your hurt tank full and your hope tank empty? Have you come to the place where, like Ruth, you said, I need your provision and I want it in my life? Have you allowed Jesus to be your kinsman redeemer and to give you all the grace, God's riches at Christ's expense that the cross was intended to give to you? Have you confessed with your mouth and believed in your heart that he truly is the Lord? Not a Lord, not one of many options, See, Jesus made some really strong statements. In John 14:6, I am the way. You know, he really he came with a great amount of clarity at that statement. He didn't say, I am a way. And by the way, when he said, I am, it is resonating in the ears of the original hearers who, when Moses said, who shall I say sent me? Tell them, I am that I am sent you, right? Jewish people would understand this deep truth. The God of the universe, Jesus is saying, I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. No one has hope for eternity without me. No one has hope to spend eternity with the Father unless they come through me. No one comes to the Father but by me. Maybe you're here today and you've been trying to fill the God-shaped void in your life with all kinds of things. And your hurt tank is full and your hope tank is empty. And Jesus, our kinsman redeemer, is saying, I'll cover you with my wings. I'll provide for you. I'll hit a reset button in your life. I'll give you hope. I'll forgive your mistakes. And I'll give you a future that has hope. Maybe that's where you're at today. You know, the word believe in the Bible isn't an intellectual check mark we make. It is a word that orients. The word believe really means when we believe something, our actions are oriented around that truth that we profess. Like, I believe this stool will hold me, and my actions are affirming that truth. Right? Church, this is what I know. Choosing hope can happen in an instant. And I don't understand why some journeys are really long and bumpy and why some freedom comes in a moment, but maybe you're here today because hope has been elusive for you, and God of the angel armies is saying, it's time for you to make the trade. It's time for you to make the trade. I know this is a big ask in today's culture of church because I'm asking you to be transparent. I'm asking you to be authentic. I'm asking you to be exposed in some areas, right? I'm asking you to allow God to do a deeper work in you. Here's what I do know. It's difficult. It's difficult. And it's unfair to ask God to do things for you that you're not willing to allow Him to do in you. Right? Okay. These are the reasons that when a pastor says, I'm almost done, almost never believe it. Just give him grace. I know I said that 10 minutes ago. I want to pray. And then I want you to have a moment. We'll wrap things up. Father, man, as I reflect on your goodness and your grace, I am thankful that you love us in our imperfections and in our mess. I thank you that you love us when our messes are big and we blame you for them. I thank you that you love us in our inability to even understand your grace. I thank you that you love us so much that while we were yet sinning and messed up, you died for us. And we were ungodly, and you became the sacrifice to bridge the gap between a relationship with God and the hurt of our heart. And through the cross, you fulfilled the Old Testament law, and you fill the role of the kinsman redeemer in our lives, redeeming us from the slavery that we so often willingly sold ourselves into, redeeming the things that the enemy had taken from us, redeeming us by your great love. Father, I pray today that marriages would be filled with hope. I pray that parents would be filled with hope. I pray that the areas of life that have been riddled by hurt would be replaced with hope. I pray that we would see you work miracles of restoration and miracles of healing in lives today that help us walk with hope, because you are the one who gives hope to the hopeless. You're the one who shares your home with the orphans. You're the one who calls us your sons and your daughters. You truly are a great, great God. Father, I'm grateful that your sovereignty is not dependent on our circumstances. I'm thankful, Father, that your greatness is not dependent on the hard things that we're living in. I'm grateful that your love for us is bigger than our doubt about you in moments of our weakness. Lord, I pray that you would have this moment, use it for your kingdom glory, and that your church, this tribe we call Lifepoint, would walk out of here more hopeful than they walked in here today, because you're the granter of hope. You're the one who makes all things new. You're the one who makes beautiful things out of our mess. You're the one who works all things together for good for those that love you and are called according to your purpose. You're the one that shrinks the gap between sons and dads. You're the one who can break the chains of addiction. You're the one that can help us walk in towards freedom and walk to freedom and journey in it out of our pain. So we give you this moment. We affirm your power. We thank you for your love. And we ask that you would shape our hearts with your hope in the name of Jesus. Amen.